I'll get started. My name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Control Board. Today is February 26th, 2025. It's 1:03 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. February is Black History Month, and I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the intergenerational harm that has been perpetrated against Black communities by cannabis criminalization and the war on drugs more broadly. Vermont, in my opinion, has done a better job than most in reckoning with this history. It's adopted some of the most expansive expungement laws, including automatic expungement for certain cannabis crimes. It's created the Land Access and Opportunity Board, housing for marginalized. It's created the Racial Disparities Advisory Panel to help rout out the disproportionate impact of criminal and juvenile justice systems. It created the Health Equity Access Advisory Committee to improve outcomes systems. And of course, it created the Office of Racial Equity that's focused on eliminating systemic racism in government operations. It created the Social Equity Program in the cannabis industry to try and support individuals and communities that have been most harmed by cannabis prohibition. Obviously, that work is really only scratching the surface of addressing the harm. But really the kind of through line between all those initiatives is greater economic equity. Again, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that disproportionate impact and the kind of increased enforcement over the years on kind of Black, brown, and poor communities. Anyone want to add to that at all? I mean, I know it's talk and not action, but you know.
Well, but there's a lot that has been done over the last several years that you just listed, and there's still certainly work to do. But I appreciate you pointing out all of that and acknowledging the month.
Likewise. Yeah, I'm sure I have much more to add. Thank you.
We had a rules hearing. Thank you, Gabe and Patrick and the compliance and licensing team for taking that on. There were some very thoughtful and genuinely helpful comments that were discussed there. We set aside some time today on our agenda for the three of us to discuss some of the common themes that we heard. But I really want to thank everyone for your comments to date and remind you that the public comment window for the rules closes this Friday. And so once that window closes, we'll do a very comprehensive deep dive into all the kind of unique comments that we received on the rules and discuss amending them, of course, in an open meeting context. And then they're off to LCAR and hopefully will get promulgated. As I mentioned at our last meeting, we've officially signed the lease on the space for our quality assurance lab in Colchester. And we've now posted the job for the lab director. You can find that job description and the kind of information about applying on the state's HR website. So please take a look at that, share it around for anyone that you think might be interested. Other than that, we got to just approve the minutes from certainly our last meeting, but also I think they're ready from we had a working session on 12/18, or sorry, Patrick's kind of updating me on all the ones that he did. There's a special board meeting on the 15th and the regular board meeting on January 29th. You guys had a chance to look those over?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So moving down the agenda, let's move to public comment. We'll do this the same way we always do. If you have a comment and you join via the link, please raise your virtual hands. And once we get through those, we'll move to the folks that joined via phone. Right. And if you join by phone and would like to comment, you can hit *6 to unmute your phone. Okay. I will close the public comment window then. And Olga, we're going straight to the executive director report today.
here we are. So that is our report for February 26th of 2025. All right, so as the chair pointed, we had 2 events devoted to the amendments to our rules. Again, thank you to everybody who contributed to those discussions. The current and proposed rules are on our website, so feel free to check in if you haven't had a chance to check those out. And our next peer networking event is still in the works, but it is tentatively scheduled for March 19th, and it will be devoted to the inventory tracking forms. Patrick will advertise it broadly once the exact date and time is confirmed. And as always, we encourage everybody to participate in those events. So that's a quick update here. And moving on, I actually wanted to start this presentation with a big shout out to our staff for their behind the scenes work on improving the licensing and product registration portals on our website. Our team has been focused on enhancing functionality of our website, making data more accessible and user-friendly. And I have a couple slides to provide a quick overview of the most recent enhancements. So again, just a quick look here. This is a screenshot, a quick example here, how you can easily search for specific or broad subsets of the licensing data on our website now. You can search licenses by business name, license type, tier, number, priority status. And this data is now updated automatically and on a daily basis. So again, we are very excited to offer this improved public-facing licensing portal. And you can find it on the website under the Data and Resources header. And one other slide here, again, to show the new product portal, where the users can search for products using various criteria. Again, business name, product name. One other slide here on product search, showing that you can refine your search further by searching by categories of products as well. So again, a huge thank you to our data manager, Liz, Patrick, who is our outreach manager, who you know, and our PR team with Alex and Janae for leading this public-facing enhancements and making these tools more accessible to the public and all of us. So that's a little part here. And now we'll move on to the adult use licensing data. I will have just a few slides this month and keep it pretty brief, especially since we now have a portal on the website. I will, however, spend some time going over data on license relinquishments. I know Julie had asked for that data last time, so we have a couple slides on that. But diving in first, our quick review of the current active licenses. So again, a quick snapshot going back 3 months so we could watch for trends. The data is actually as of 25th, so it's very fresh. And we are at 621 licenses, as you can see. Gains are primarily in the cultivator category. Not surprising, given the big push by our cultivation applicants to submit their materials prior to the closure of their cultivation application window at the end of January. You can see February data is a darker purplish blue color, and we're at 405 cultivators currently. You could see other numbers as well.
Integrated going from 3 to 2.
Yes, we officially, I think, as of the 19th of this month. Yep. That's right. And we are locked in at 110 retail establishments now, with all of them being issued. So that's a quick look. And again, the usual slide on the priority status. Numbers remain steady months over months, so no changes here. Now I'm going to quickly jump on the retail locations by county slide. That's a new one we put together for you to show the current distribution of retail establishments now that all of the remaining applications in the queue have been issued. And the window is currently closed for any new applicants. Not surprisingly, Chittenden, Rutland, and Windsor counties lead the way, with Caledonia and Lamoille being close behind in terms of the density. So a quick summary here, where we stand. And now I'm going to jump into the relinquishments data. So here, since the start of the market, we have reported and recorded 168 license relinquishments. And this chart breaks down the data by fiscal year priority status. So not calendar, but fiscal year, which is July 1 through June 30 for the state of Vermont. So in the first year of issuing licenses, we saw 4 relinquishments. Then there was a big jump last fiscal year with 96. And so far, we got 60 in the first 8 months of fiscal year 25. And we are tracking close to the last fiscal year's numbers so far. We don't expect to be over 96. And the vast majority, as you could see, of the licenses belong to our standard applicants, shown here in orange, with a handful of economic empowerment and social equity businesses who relinquished their licenses in the last 8 months of so far.
Were there, I think there were also some in 23 and 24. It's just too small a number for the chart.
I don't think,
no?
it's, I thought there might have been, but for some reason when we ran the report, they didn't come up.
Okay.
So if you think there, I will look at the data a little closer.
I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, because now if they weren't in 24, they're starting to pay a larger portion of the fee. So that's an interesting thing to track.
Yeah. And again, fiscal year 24 would have ended on June 30th. Mm-hmm. So folks who relinquished in September of last year would be captured in Y25. But we'll double check just to make sure. It is a new set of slides here. And I have another slide again on the relinquishments to also to sort of, again, look for the trends around who is leaving the market. So here you're looking at the data broken down by the license type, again, across the last 3 fiscal years. So we're looking at our 168 relinquishments, and cultivators represented in green, not surprisingly, account for the largest number of relinquishments, with manufacturers coming in second with 24 total relinquishments, and then retailers with 6 relinquishments, all 6 in the last fiscal year, and 5 wholesalers. So that's what we got on that top.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Good. All right, moving on. I have a couple quick slides on product registration data. Again, just a quick update where we are at. The team put together, it's a little bit small. It's a snapshot, a quick screenshot. So I'm going to highlight some key data points here. So you're looking at the report for the period January 15th through February 15th of this year. So 31 days. So in that period of time, we got 740 new PRs submitted, 573 individual products successfully registered, and 396 marked as incomplete. You can also tell from this report that as of February 15th, there were just under 5,000 registered products in our system, with flower leading the way, seen in the chart. Again, more data now is available in our portal, where folks can look at real-time product registration numbers and also expiration details. But that's sort of an overview of the work, 1 month of data for the team. And I have one more slide here to provide some additional color on the 396 incompletions. Again, it's pretty small here, but here you're looking at the reasons why product registration submissions have been deemed incomplete over that time period. So the standalone testing requirement was the most frequent reason for PR incompletions. However, in many cases, multiple deficiencies have been flagged simultaneously. So you're looking at the combination of testing, labeling, packaging, why some of our submitters don't meet their initial PR requirements. So that's that.
I know this is challenging because
Mhm.
we've asked in the past, and I know it's not always as easy, but
Mhm.
days to completion, like from date of submittal until date.
Yeah, I could.
Maybe for a future meeting.
Yeah, we'll get that. I think we've improved greatly on that, and I think I'll be able to pull that data for you.
And the consistency issue that we hear about, that some products get registered where similar products don't.
Yeah. I do think we've had we've changed the structure of our product registration team, which I think has made a huge impact on the rates with which we register products now and the turnaround times. I could gather some of that more
for a future
in the
meeting.
future
Yeah,
meeting.
that's great.
But I think it's been a good we've seen some improvements.
This is really helpful though.
Yeah.
Where would, so packaging requirements versus labeling requirements, which one would address like the, appealing to children?
I think, well, I guess it depends, but I assume labeling, if there's some of that would probably be in a label, but packaging might also. I think packaging is usually, if it's plastic, that's what would be captured there.
Just trying to get a sense from the, what's listed up there, what sort of issues fall under which sort of category. Thank you.
I could provide some additional color on that too. I had the team tell me what's included in the general requirements, which is its own category. So, so I'm sure we could most certainly get the examples of why folks may need to revisit their submissions and clean up some things, but.
This is good to know. Thank you.
Good. Okay. All right. So that is all we got for PR. And now we are moving on to the compliance and enforcement data. Before actually diving into the data, I'd like to share a staffing update. So just this week, we have hired our 7th full-time field agent, Amy Bacon, who started with us on Monday. We are thrilled to welcome Amy into our team, and we're excited for the members of our licensing community to meet her soon as well. So stay tuned. You may see Amy soon. And now with this additional expanded capacity, again, we should be in really good place to handle the workload north of 620 licensees. So very exciting news for us. And now we'll move into the numbers. So
sounds so fun.
Data. Are you having a good time?
Some good numbers here. So a quick summary slide here of inspections and investigations. 92 inspections and 10 investigations reported over that time period. You could see inspections are in dark blue, investigations are in red. So that's now, we'll look a little closer at the inspections on this slide. Again, 3 months worth of data here, and it's broken by the license type. February data is in dark blue, and we are reporting 48 cultivation site inspections. So a big bump from the prior 2 months. 29 retail and 13 manufacturers and 2 wholesalers also had a visit from our compliance and enforcement team. A lot of work on the inspections, and now investigations, 10 of those. So again, for February, which is dark blue, You could see 4 in cultivation, 5 in retail, and 1 new investigation in manufacturing. Okay. Moving on, now we'll look at the sort of a bit deeper into the other types of compliance and enforcement actions reported. So complaints, we got 27 of those. We've issued 12 formal letters of warning. 2 notices of violations have been served. We had 3 witness destructions and 1 cessation of operations over that time period. Okay. Now looking more specifically at the complaint types, again, 27 of those reported. Advertising is leading the way with 7, and the rest of the types are listed here.
Gabe, can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
I was listening to the rules hearing. I know there was some concern about from the public wanting to know the nature of the complaints that we're receiving. Do you mind just kind of walking through what's public and when?
Sure, that's a good question. That was a kind of interest during the rules hearing. A confidentiality of investigative matters as well as licensee information is governed by Section 901A of Title VII. That's modeled on the privacy law that's applicable to other types of government licenses, like those for a dentist or a physician or a pharmacy. And what it says in so many words is that the fact of a complaint and the information about the investigation are confidential from the public up to the point that the enforcement unit decides something substantiated and files a formal document about it. And that's sort of the tipping point at which the public has effectively full insight as they would to a court proceeding. And so every document filing, hearing, and order that follows is public. So in that way, what goes on in the cannabis world is very much consistent with what goes on in the rest of the administrative licensing world, and it's very much consistent with the rules for public access to court records.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
I wonder if it would be helpful, because I heard the same thing that you heard. If it's possible in a future meeting to share how many of the complaints are actually substantiated versus the ones that we receive, having the difference between that. I think we could probably figure it out by looking at the slides, but just highlighting how many complaints we receive versus how many are actually substantiated might relieve some of the concerns that we heard.
Yeah, I think, we could most certainly get that. And again, it's sort of inspections versus investigations, numbers, which we could use to glean that information.
And the policy rationale for the confidentiality is really to prevent kind of reputational damage from an unsubstantiated complaint.
Yeah, and I mean, in competitive regulated industries, unfortunately, there is an incentive for people to make specious complaints, and people with good intentions may make unfair inferences about somebody. For example, retailers are public facing. They're just going to get more complaints, period. That doesn't mean they're uniquely problematic. And so, it's sort of a fairness issue, and that's the way the General Assembly has made sure the public has full insight into things where there's something to know. But irrelevant information or information from which it wouldn't be fair to make an inference stays private.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thanks. Sure.
Okay, I'll just share with you a slide on our letters of warning issued. Again, these letters address violations that do not rise to the level of a formal notice of violation, as assessed by our Director of Compliance and Enforcement. Again, advertising leading the way as the cause why a letter is issued currently. So that's that. And then one last slide here, a quick breakdown of our notice of violations and the reason those were issued in the last months. Okay. All right. Next is medical program. Again, very quick here, just one slide. Nothing really has changed. So you're looking at a pretty steady numbers over the last 12 months. Yeah. Okay. And that is it for the report. And now we are moving on to the staff recommendations for licensure. And with that, I have 2 slides for you here. These are our staff recommendations for initial licensure. Everybody on this first page is a cultivator or who applied for a license.
As always, the people that join by phone, we're looking at the list of applicants recommended, and this will be posted to our website usually by the end of the day.
And there's the second slide.
Okay.
Okay.
And is that all of them
That is our, yes, that's everybody who's for initial licensure.
in the licensing queue for cultivators, though?
For now, we do have a few folks who have yet to be issued.
Yes.
They have
Right.
not completed some of their contingencies.
Right.
So we will see most likely
Okay.
a few next month.
Great work.
Yes, so if you're ready for a motion on this, we probably could.
Sure, I would take a motion.
Call from-
Yes.
I move that the board adapt staff recommendations to approve the applications listed, issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now we're moving on to the conventional license renewals, and I also have 2 slides here. And the second slide.
Great. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the applications listed, issuance subject to final payment and required fees and other contingencies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Have one final slide here. So this is the slide on our late renewals. The incumbent cannabis establishments listed here have filed explanations for untimely filing under Rule 115(1)D, but the elements required for renewal are currently missing, some of them. Necessary materials have been shared with the board ahead of this meeting. More specifically, the first establishment listed is converting its building to public building status to accommodate employees. And the fire marshal is soon to complete a final inspection for occupancy there. And then the second and third establishments have a partner in indeterminate tax status currently. Our staff recommends that the board use its authority under subdivision D2 to continue the existing licenses in force until the board's next regular meeting on March 26th. By then, it is expected that the establishments will be eligible for renewal.
Do you have a motion for that?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to accept and continue the applications listed, subject to issuance, subject to final payment and any other fees and requirements.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
And that's what we got for you
All
today.
right.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Olga. And thanks to the whole team. No, it's a group effort.
It always is.
Yeah. Okay. Olga, if you are double booked, you are more than welcome to leave for this next part of the agenda, which is to do a kind of quick recap on the rules hearing and have a discussion amongst the board and Gabe, because really there was a lot that was discussed. I think it was nearly a 3-hour meeting. And I think, just given that the window is about to close on public comment, it might be useful for both our staff and for the public to kind of hear what direction the board wants to go. I don't think we're going to decide anything today, but I think just getting some of our thoughts, some of our reflections on what was discussed will be helpful. both to kind of give you some direction and redrafting if need be, and just to keep the comments coming if we're kind of still getting things wrong. So I picked out, I think, 5 issues that I think are the big ticket items that we got a lot of public comment on and that have kind of dramatic impacts. So that's not to say that the other issues are not important, but I think these are the kind of ones that I feel like we may need to tweak. And if there's any others, feel free to bring them up. Just again, on process, we're not going to make any decisions here today about amending these rules, any like concrete decisions. We're going to keep receiving public comment till Friday. And we will hold a special meeting or tack it on to one of our regular meetings to review all of the public comments and make changes to the rules based upon those comments. Consider us. And then we'll send it off to the legislature for their approval. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right. So the first one, I think, no surprise, retail siting received a lot of comments. I think, generally speaking, there's a diversity of opinions that, on the one hand, there 110 is enough, that we really shouldn't have any more, and that we should try to limit our retail siting rule to really restrict how many new entrants on the retail side there should be. On the flip side, we heard that retail is a choke point for cultivators access and manufacturers accessing the market, and that there's not enough shelf space out there to accommodate all the cultivators. Certainly, I think something that we've noticed at the board is there are swaths of the state that don't have easy access to regulated cannabis, which is the whole point of what we're doing, is to kind of give people an alternative to either the illicit market or the intoxicating hemp market or the pharmaceutical market or any other industries. I think we needed to get something out, in my view. We needed to get something out. Because we can't let retail siting hold up the rest of the rules. And I think that, I'd like to take into consideration those comments. I mean, I think we focused largely on municipal borders and populations within municipal borders. Of course, consumers don't care about municipal borders. If there's 3 in, Waitsfield, 3 more pop up in Warren, if they opted in, then there's 6. There could potentially be 6 in a very small area. So I'm thinking, in my view, we should be thinking more regionally about the issue of retail siting, not just merely on municipal borders.
I think we did build some of that in. Maybe we can make that a little bit more prevalent in how we think about this. And just for the folks listening, I just want everybody to remember, we've got a lot of things that we're trying to balance. We're trying to balance business viability, access points for consumers, and affordability for consumers. And not all of them always line up in a linear path for, success, depending on how you define it. I've seen a lot of comments, especially comparing us to other markets. And I think that's a dangerous game if you're looking at raw numbers. Talked about tourism. I'm not going to talk about tourism today, but there's so many factors as to why we have a number of stores and a different jurisdiction has another number of stores. How much local control is there? Is it a lottery system? Did MSOs get a first shot at things? The list goes on and on. So when you start comparing us to other markets, I do think there's a little apples to oranges that's going on. I think it's a helpful reference point. I'm not going to sit here and think that it's unhelpful, especially we saw that in a number of comments that we received. At the same time, I know folks are counting potential opportunities in smaller towns and trying to figure out how many more licenses would theoretically be available. And that takes a lot of entrepreneurial interest to put out your shingle in a very small town in a corner of the state that has not been serviced by this industry. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful, frankly. I think even one of the things that we tried to do, which I've seen some pushback in the rules, is even if you think about the smallest towns, I think it's under 4,000 total residents, competition kind of drives innovation and an ability for the consumer to have their pick of what they want to consume and how they want to consume it and what they want to buy at the end of the day. I think from my perspective, I'm a little hesitant to only say one place per this many people, because when that person gets that license, they are in effect a local, hyper local monopoly on cannabis products as it flows in and out of that small municipality. So again, intent, logic, hoping people understand that we are trying to balance lots of different things. If you have one licensee in one town in a cannabis desert, they are picking the 10 cultivators that you might be able, 10-ish cultivators that you might be able to purchase from in that area. They might be hyper local to that area. They might be more of the state known brands around, the cannabis community, or have trickled their way into what actual or casual consumers think is a good brand for them, whether it's indoor or sun grown or a tier 4 or a tier 1 or whatever the case may be. But the more you provide competition to those 10 specific brands, there's an argument that smaller local brands might be able to find some shelf space. You're figuring out the balance between what maintains viability from a retail point of sale with helping to encourage a price point that's affordable, and also price points that are, like access points. Competition drives the price of cannabis just like it does anything else. So again, we're looking to balance all of this. I'm with you. We put something out that we thought was a good starting point. I'm very thankful for all the comments, because I think I'm starting to see things from a different perspective. I think it's great that we don't have a bottom line attached to our decision making, but a lot of folks do. But retailers stand at a point in this market where they can pick and choose who wants to be on their store shelves, and I want to make sure that we figure out ways over time, whether it's through our rules or suggestions to the legislature, on how we can continue to maintain viability in our smaller license types, so they have an equal opportunity, whatever that might be, to have their product have their product in a cannabis product or on a store shelf, or be a part of the supply chain here.
I mean, I think whatever we do, we need to spend a lot of time really thinking about the impact.
Yeah.
Because this particular lever can have a lot of impact on the market, the entire supply chain. So, we do have to balance both sides of the equation, which is what you're talking about, right? Like retail with like access to from small cultivators. But we also know from the RAND report that we got early on that too much density can have a negative public health impact. So we have to kind of figure out all of those things. And, what is the span of competition? Is it within municipal borders? Is it within 15 miles? How far do people drive to buy their groceries versus, all those things? DLL does some of that data when they look at where they're going to put a new liquor store. I think we can probably look at that as a model in some way and adapt it to, to what we need to do, or amend it to what we need to do. But regardless, I think we need to do a little bit of research to make sure that we get this in particular really, really right.
I'm with you there. And one thing that I don't think I heard as much comment on is how much local control should there be on this decision making. I mean, if, what we said is there's kind of a pressure release valve. You can exceed those presumptive numbers if either we say that there should be an extra store based upon market demand, or the local authority votes to allow it. And I know whether that was an or an and, or whether this should be an entirely a local decision.
Right.
And take us out of this. I think is also one pathway. And again, at the municipal level, I was thinking maybe how do you expand the aperture of kind of taking a regional approach? And do you look at counties? And if you do look at counties, who do you ask in the county whether they want more? So that's where sort of going down the path of maybe involving the regional planning commissions. Again, when you ask the locals, like, they generally know what's right for their kind of general areas. But it does turn political. Like we're trying to make this non-political. We're trying to make it kind of objective. But you know, when you have individuals voting at that level, you know, they could have a cannabis bias one way or the other.
Right.
And I think you've seen some of those issues in other states play out, whether it's corruption or whether it's stacking the deck against a specific business, so on and so forth is some of it.
I don't think it's isolated to cannabis either. I
Right.
think it happens with all kinds of industry and business and things that happen at the local level. Just happens. With the regional planning commissions, I think we'd have to be, or those boundaries, I think we'd have to be really clear about what we want from that or what the goal is. What I know of regional planning commissions is like they support their member towns, and like if you're going to build a shopping mall, we're going to make sure you have the right roadways and the right drainage and those types of things. But they also do know the region the best. And when you look at counties, because I was thinking about this too, then you look at someplace like Chittenden County where you have Underhill, which is really rural, and then you have Burlington. So how do you make that? How do you make one rule work for both of those places?
Exactly.
Is
And on
that
that,
helpful? Probably not. But
on that piece, I know we don't have tiers of retail, but it does seem to me, to your point and to your point, that some of these smaller towns or even smaller, you know, less densely populated areas of the state just will never be able to support a standalone store of any kind. And like, so liquor control, they have the kind of kiosk model.
Yep.
You know, there's a liquor kiosk in the Maple Fields in Berlin. And it's, you know, there could be, I think part of the conversation, at least with the legislature, should there be some allowance if we're going to, in order to achieve the geographic distribution that they asked for when they gave us this task, like that, it's not like this, the one tier of retail license isn't going to be an effective strategy for certain parts of the town.
Yeah.
Or certain parts of the state.
right. Or they would have to take over a portion of an existing structure.
Right.
Right. Like
Have
the way that
behind the counter sales or something like that
Right,
for a limited
right.
number of products.
Right.
Something like
the grocery store in Williston, for example, has a liquor store in it. It's you enter into the grocery store, but you enter a separate entrance to get to
Right.
the liquor store.
Yep. Yeah. So retail siting is a tricky one. Gabe, do we have the authority to just take a little bit more time with this and not delay the rest of the rules?
I think so. I mean, I might feel better if we had some, instruction this session from the General Assembly by way of session law. Our instruction to do this came out of Act 166 last year, Section 4, and that stuck into Title 7, Section 881. That's the board's rulemaking grant, subdivision A5F, and that little subdivision is the one that says you shall have rules that do this. No particular deadline was given, so I think your duty is to be working conscientiously on it. It might make sense to ask the General Assembly if they wouldn't tuck in a piece of session law that is pass a law that isn't codified, that just acknowledges that they understand that more time would be taken. But that seems appropriate to me. I'm not, we had a wonderful meeting, got great public feedback, and some really thoughtful ideas. They're coming in real close to when we need to adopt the rule for other reasons, and there's just a lot to chew on. So it's important we get this right. I think we had the Burlington City Councilor who sits on their LCC joined and expressed some of the frustrations you were talking about what is our role here, and don't we have superior information at the local level about what's going on? So finding some way to integrate local input into the analysis that comes under that subdivision A5F work makes sense. And as you had suggested, maybe some kind of a micro licensing or tiered licensing would make some localities more comfortable and solve some of these problems. For me, it's sort of a time thing in the sense that we have some maintenance that needs to be done in the administrative rule. People need it out for other reasons. And I feel like this particular piece is just a very tall order for you guys.
We're also going to start working on a market study, which could be really informative here.
Yes, right, exactly.
And if we were to do something like that, the regulatory moratorium would just continue until we are comfortable with working through this part of the rule.
That's, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I still have a lot to read, a lot to think about. I'm sure the two of you do too. It's not something I want to rush and feel like we missed the mark and then have to do this again.
I mean, I looked at a number of other jurisdictions. Nobody has best practices. Like everybody has done it exactly how it's right for their state. So that's what we should do. And that just takes time and thought.
Yeah, and I think there's also on the municipal question again, I genuinely think there's confusion within municipalities, including some well-staffed municipal governments, about what their authority actually is to adopt ordinances around retail siting themselves. Because there's that, it's like you have all the basic authority that you would have for any other shop, except you can't pass an ordinance that would prohibit the operation of a cannabis retail establishment. So what does that mean? Any ordinance you pass will necessarily limit.
Right. Everyone's operating on their interpretation. No one has tested it. Not that I'm asking for that, but I'm just saying that we don't have, no one has tested it.
Yeah. Even the liquor model, it's somewhat, it's helpful, but it's somewhat not at the same time because the state works as a wholesaler. And so they have a different interest because they're trying to make sure that they return value in a way that we're not trying to return value in how they hand out 802 spirit stores.
I mean, we could consider certain distances in terms of it's within 15 miles of each other. It's probably maybe not dense, but it's not, there's still competition, right? I think when I'm thinking about the DLL, it's more related to the sort of catch-all in that rule that if you want to have more, that would be the data we could ask for to
the mileage. To some of the commenters that I listened to from at least one at the hearing, like even mileage is tough because of the nature of our state, right? Like I live, as the crow flies, like 15 miles from Sugarbush. Like I don't live in Warren or Waitsfield, I live in Roxbury. But it takes me 35 minutes to get there, and the mileage to get there, not as the crow flies, is vastly different than as the crow flies. So there's lots of layers to this. I don't want anybody to think that we're going to rush into a decision that ends up not working for both the existing retailers, those that are trying to open. Like I know that I'm sure there's some that are trying, like I think Heinsberg's going to vote to opt in. Wilmington's going to vote to opt out. I think there's another town that was going to vote to opt in.
There's 3 that have it on the ballot to opt in.
Yeah.
And 1 that has it on the ballot to opt out.
We couldn't just hold a moratorium on towns that we couldn't allow towns that have no license retailers for folks to seek a license in those towns, correct? It's kind of like all or nothing the way that the law has, based on our authority, how the law was written, I'd imagine.
Somewhat. I mean, I think that, when an existing license changes location, there's an application under section 1.17 of your rules and you pass on it. And I think that you'll have some authority to develop those around it.
I know that was a convoluted way to ask that question.
We can by statute though, right? Prioritize geographic location.
You can, but it should be occurring under the same rule that we need to adopt, basically.
Right. So we're back to the same spot. Right.
Yeah, so it's a challenge. And then there's the adjoining municipalities issue where, some municipalities are right next to one that's completely stocked. If they were to flip, they would, wouldn't have a way to account for that.
We do allow, even under this moratorium, changes of location.
Yes, you would have some discretion as a board under section 1.17 to approve or deny. It would really be an application to amend the license under the proposed rules. And I think you could look at the underlying purposes of Act 166, Section 4, and say it's going to make it worse. We can, we're going to let you do that. I think it's a completely legitimate evaluation.
But it wouldn't prohibit existing licenses from moving to towns that are recently opted in, right?
That's correct. If in the board's discretion, the board were to grant the 1.17 license amendment to move them. Yeah.
Well, I know we got a lot of good comments on this. We got a lot of good considerations that the board should be thinking about around retail siting. Any more that anyone who's listening has, please keep sending them in. It seems to me like this piece of the rule might take a little bit longer than we and then potentially the rest of the rule changes.
We want to make sure we get it right and try and balance that ease of access, price point, and business viability. And I do think that even in the smallest communities, a degree, whatever that degree is, of healthy competition between multiple businesses isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Any more on this for now? I know we didn't come to any sort of resolution here. That's not really the point, but any more that we want to talk about while we're on retail siting?
No, I want to read through the comments again and see what we end up with for more comments.
Yeah. Are there any other like industries that we want to talk to? I know you reached out to DLL about their processes for 802 spirit stores.
None are quite like this,
I
right?
know.
Like if you think about like a Dollar General or a CVS, I mean, it's different because if there are not enough, or if there, let's say this, if there are too many, then they, one absorbs the other. This is not how, we can't do that. One person just loses out entirely. If we over compete or allow too much competition and let the market collapse. Or if one is overstocked in any other industry, they just send whatever they need somewhere, they just make trades, and they can't do that here.
Yeah, on the flip side, like I live near Northfield and there used to be one pizza shop. And now there's a Domino's and another new pizza shop. So there's 3 pizza shops in Northfield.
Right.
So that's a small community. So didn't know if you knew that. There's Domino's in Northfield now.
I saw it.
But why not anything else? See, that's the interesting part.
Yeah, you're right.
Surely somebody wants something besides pizza.
It's college town.
All right. Well, we'll move on. I think brand licensing, the requirement that not just the manufacturer, if there's a brand associated with a product, that the company behind that brand needs to be licensed so that we can, so they can't skirt all of our regulations through, advertising or promotional events. And, Gabe, can you just talk a little bit through the genesis of this rule change?
Yeah, the rule
Or
change.
maybe not the genesis of it, but what the problem that we're trying to address.
I can. The problem is, in particular, your board is charged with regulating very closely the way cannabis is marketed and packaged and sold. That's both to protect from industry marketing that's attractive to children, as well as to prevent health claims that aren't permitted. And the problem then becomes if brands are allowed with no questions asked that don't correspond to a license, you could have someone who is not under your jurisdiction, your regulatory jurisdiction, effectively marketing for the people who are, marketing cannabis in a manner that affects the public health and safety, but that you couldn't reach. It's also a conduit for unlicensed activity. Some of the people that had been calling themselves brand promoters were actually taking custody of cannabis or receiving proceeds of cannabis sales. That's unlicensed wholesaling. That's not, that's just illegal. So the effort was really to close the loophole for marketing, sort of, and to deter and prevent unlicensed wholesaling. Although I should note it's illegal.
Yes.
Anyway, if you did nothing, it'd be illegal. But this prevents people falling on the wrong side of the line inadvertently when they get in as a brand promoter, just licensing brand or something, and then the clients want them to go cut the deals with the retailers. Then all of a sudden they're wholesaling. So it's very easy to tip in, and the thinking was that some measures should prevent that. We did hear from a couple of interests who would be significantly negatively impacted in their opinion, and so it may warrant thinking about other ways to get at that problem.
Yeah, I mean, the main comment that I heard is some of these brands just cannot, for other reasons, become a cannabis establishment. Either their insurance won't cover it, or they can't jump through all the bells and whistles of getting a cannabis license. So that those relationships will just terminate, which is not really the intention behind what we're trying to solve.
I don't think we're trying to put a squash on collaborations, especially between Vermont businesses, like a Vermont cannabis business and a non-cannabis Vermont business, whether it's a maple sugar producer or a cider producer, you want to call it. I don't think that was our intent. And I know some of my comments last meeting around national brands kind of took hold in some of the comments that we've received. And I wanted to kind of clarify what I was trying to message, which is what you were alluding to. If I would like to see, and again, there's multiple ways to do this. So I don't want this to seem like I am hell-bent on what has been drafted already, but some brands that have a presence in multiple jurisdictions or have the ability, because they're in other jurisdictions, to market and advertise in ways that Vermont businesses, because of our laws that we have to regulate or enforce, they can do things that Vermont businesses can't. Cannabis brands have tried to advertise at the Super Bowl. That gives a competitive advantage to those brands that are coming into Vermont. Especially because, I know, again, tourism, folks don't think it's as big as a problem or a point as I do, but they still tourists make up 9 to 10% of our GDP. If you have a national brand, and we don't know how they're advertising in other jurisdictions, it makes it challenging for Vermont-based businesses to come in, for a tourist to come into the state and pick the Vermont business over the national brand. I just want to see a level playing field in some way, shape, or form, where we know who is operating that brand and have a little bit more discretion to, if they're doing things that are in violation of Vermont law, make sure that we can find and penalize them accordingly.
There are a couple, I just want to point out to you kind of two alternatives that crossed my mind, and not pitching them really, just sort of saying they would get there. One is you could ask the General Assembly for authority to register brands and bring them under your jurisdiction. Those would be brands registered by people that are not cannabis establishments. By definition, if you're a cannabis establishment or you have a DPA, that should be an issue. So that's one way to solve it. Another is, if we're just thinking back to the two problems that we were talking about, the sort of, accountability and marketing, and possession and tipping over. If you were to clarify in some way that sort of, no touch, no proceeds, no problem policy, where somebody who has a brand and they never touch cannabis, no custody, no transportation, nothing, and they don't receive proceeds of cannabis sales, they can't be structured that way as a business. They don't really need a license in one construction of the statute. If you were to interpret the statute that way, you could conclude that they don't. I'm not saying that is what you should do, but and then that leaves the problem of accountability for marketing. And one of the feedback that we got at the hearing on the 20th, there was a piece of feedback we got at the hearing, was manufacturers saying, we don't mind being accountable for it. We go ahead. You said you want to know whose head's on a pike when this goes south. We'll be accountable for it. Meaning, if the Super Bowl ad appearing, to target kids or something ridiculous like that happens, the Vermont regulator could nonetheless say, not your fault, but your stuff's got to come off the shelves. So those are two ways to do it. One through the legislature, one through sort of an alternative approach to rulemaking. But I just want to put this on the table for you to think about.
Is there? Maybe this is just too abstract a legal question, but are we on steady ground to hold someone accountable for the actions of a third party, even if they have a production agreement?
It's certainly, we're on firmer ground if they actually commit to it, and a rule makes very clear that they're committing to it when they make the choice to feature the brand that is not their own. To me, it's sort of why if somebody does that, maybe you have a civil action against the person that goofed up your brand. But I do think it's fair play and due notice if our own rule says a manufacturer that elects to have a brand that isn't a registered cannabis establishment shall be responsible in all regulatory respects for the marketing of the brand.
And would they be responsible in this opinion, in this version of the rules, for all of the violations, or just the product registration? The product would have to be pulled.
The latter, I'm thinking off the cuff here,
Yeah,
the latter.
right.
It wouldn't make any sense to say, well, you're going to be fined for
Yeah,
something
right.
you couldn't predict or control.
Right.
But it would make sense to say you accept the risk that things might go haywire outside of our jurisdiction when you took in a brand outside of our jurisdiction, and now we have to remove the product from shelves. This is a civil matter between you and the brand. And
If there was a statutory change that changed advertising not to just cannabis establishments, but also included cannabis products, would that bring it under the board? Would that bring even larger brands under the board's jurisdiction when it came to advertising, which seems to be the main reason that we're talking about this, at least in this particular conversation?
yes, I mean, it's a funny licensing statute in that
Right.
it says sell as the verb. That's one of the licensed things. And so what does it mean to sell? Is marketing selling cannabis? It certainly is if you're getting paid by the unit of cannabis that transfers. But so it's a really difficult question. If we were to ask the General Assembly for authority to do brand licensing, we would want to clearly define as a licensed activity marketing cannabis and cannabis products. That isn't done right now. And right
Mhm.
now we've got sell and,
Right.
and
I
all
guess
that it
that's what
may
I'm
or may not
asking.
mean.
Yeah.
You as a regulator have pretty broad discretion in how that word is interpreted, and you can apply it to protect the public as you think appropriate, but we need to be consistent.
Sure.
So I guess enough said about that, but those are two alternative ways to.
So in general, it sounds like we're at least in somewhat agreement that there is a problem we're trying to solve with this.
Yeah.
But maybe the approach that we've taken is it captures activity that we didn't want it to capture.
Yes, and I think the problem also is a little bit more theoretical than real at this point. I know there are the two websites. I don't love it. They don't have the warnings up, which, but that's probably easily fixed by just asking them to do the thing. The trouble, though, is that it's voluntary unless they're under jurisdiction.
I had a question about before I forget this, about the collaborations. So when it's like a food collaboration, my assumption is that the food part of it is already regulated by the Department of Health, and then it's essentially adulterated with cannabis after it's
Yes.
after it's made and regulated by the Department of Health. Is that right, or is it not?
I think the best way I can put it is it was never the intention, and I don't believe it would be the effect of the proposed language to prevent someone or treat as a brand the accurate statement of a constituent ingredient that's not cannabis. So if I put in a famous brand cider in my drink, as long as it's okay with the cider establishment, sure, nobody's going to get confused about that.
Right.
It just can't look like the cannabis brand.
Right.
Yes, yeah. I mean, my question related to that is, so we have a company that makes a food product here in Vermont, and they're a certified commercial kitchen, and they do a collab with a cannabis company. We're saying that because of this arrangement, they need to get a cannabis establishment license so that they're under our jurisdiction. It's my understanding that the Department of Health won't allow that anyone with a cannabis, they won't inspect or do anything, even if you're not a plant touching entity. You're just a brand. So are we
Setting people up.
to lose their Department of Health certification if we
No,
move forward with this?
I think whatever you do, you're not going to want to reach people that make constituent ingredients that are not cannabis.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think you want to reach them at all.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds to me like this is one of the areas where we need to kind of narrow what we've proposed here. Really get kind of laser focused at the issue that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I can understand how the words on the page made it seem like all of these collaborative efforts could be captured, but it was not my intent when we initially proposed this part of the rule.
Anyone have anything else on this issue for now? Okay. The next on my list was kind of a narrow issue, but an important one for sure, is allowing some flexibility in packaging for medical products. What we did in the rule is just we tried to kind of converge the regulatory requirements around testing and labeling and packaging for medical products, the medical use system and the adult use system. We just kind of cross-reference them. And I think that brings in all of the child-resistant packaging, including for people that really can't use open child-resistant packaging for one reason or another. And it also brings in the plastic ban. And I mean, my intention here was, to harmonize those two systems, but it certainly wasn't to make medical products vastly more expensive because they have to comply with all the adult use regulations. Certainly, we need the testing, and you know, it's just non-negotiable for me. But we already make allowances on the medical side for plastic and transdermal patches come in plastic packaging. They're plastic themselves. I think for me, if it's a medical only product, like it's prohibited on the adult use side, that we can have much greater flexibility on what's allowed in the packaging sense. But if it is an adult use product, if it's on both shelves, if it's on both markets, like a medical use endorsement, that the adult use regulation should apply.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would like to make it accessible for people who need it and certainly not more expensive, but I agree. Like my first question was, how does this work with products that are available on both sides of this market?
Right.
And I think we'd have to narrow it to the ones that are just medical. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure people are staring at Kyle because of the packaging stuff or plastic stuff, but I'm with you both. I think medical only products are a good starting point for being exempt from the packaging plastic requirements. I'm less persuaded on some of the other packaging stuff that we've heard through the comments at this point in time, even around clones and propagated plants. We can talk about that when we do a special meeting or whatever. But I think for medical only products, it makes sense.
Okay. Consignment. We did a ban on consignment. I think our general rationale was we're seeing some bad, people getting taken advantage of, A, and B, it is a nightmare when there's an abrupt cessation of operations or closure to deal with the kind of who owns what. And I think the legislature really did intend that when cannabis changes hands among licensees, that it legally changes hands, and the receiver takes ownership of that, and we're seeing some kind of blurring of the lines that's causing us problems. Am I wrong on that, or is there anything more to add there?
No, that's a concise way to put it, and I guess to my understanding, and it cleared up a lot of confusion and anxiety with people. Nothing about that prohibits promissory notes between people. Nothing about that prohibits credit or lines of credit from one person to another. Those are private business arrangements. It's really that the custodian must be the legal owner.
Right. And so did we go too far? Are we inhibiting the way that people generally do business by what we did in the rule with no consignment ever and under any circumstances, including kind of promissory notes or?
No, excluding promissory. I don't think that's consignment really to me. Okay. So if you're owed, goods are delivered, they become the possession of the person to whom they're delivered. You're owed money on a separate track, and you can enforce that in the courts or whatever. We didn't get too much worry about that. I was actually expecting a little bit more. I think people understand it. I don't think that as properly construed, it's terribly disruptive. There certainly are a handful of people that really want genuine consignment. I don't want to say nobody's going to be affected. I think there may be some small cultivators that really wanted that, hoping to crack into the market. Same time, there's so many business arrangements that are not prohibited by this that there are kind of ways around it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard examples, for instance, let's say I'm a small cultivator. I want to turn 100% of my grown flower into a product, and I give it to a manufacturer expecting to take back possession of it. They're worried about how this impacts that type of business relationship because typically right after they've grown it, they haven't made enough money yet in order to pay that manufacturer to perform that service for them. So If that's captured by this, I'd be happy to exempt that specific scenario from this. And the other thing I've heard is some of the larger tier growers can approach a retailer and say, hey, dedicate X amount of shelf space to me. You don't need to pay me right now. You can pay me when the transaction happens, or something like that. And those, I think, those types of arrangements are really what we've been trying to get a better thumb on.
Is there anything, I mean, are we missing the boat on any of this, Gabe? Do you kind of understand?
I think I understand it. I guess we want to consider, if you want to really limit payment terms, say 60, 90 days, got to happen. You could do that. The current draft doesn't.
I know the current draft is 0 or no days, right? I think 60 or 90 might even be too much based off of what I heard, but I'd be willing to push it to 15 or 30, Matt, or something like that, just to kind of give a little bit more clarity to some of the folks, and understand that even the more successful parts of our supply chain, it's common practice. If I go to the mechanic, like I have to pay my mechanic when I pick up the car, but not every mechanic operates that way. Some will give you 30 days to make payment.
But that would be like a promise. So
Sure.
I don't have a strong feeling about this. I'm just wondering what the difference between like a net 15 or 30 or 60
I think
is in a promissory note or some other type of
Sure.
contractual payment.
I do think there's some comments around this. So the more we have almost 200 pages of public comments to work through. I don't know where we all are on them, and the window hasn't closed yet, but I think there's some opportunity to kind of hear the business side of it in the comments.
It's an invitation for more comments if anyone listening has any on this issue. One that came up a few times is around multi-serving edibles and tablets, pills. I think we're, just as table setting, the legislature put potency caps on serving size, package size, in addition to the kind of, flower THC concentrations and edible or concentrate THC potencies. And it's 5 milligrams per serving. And then, of course, that leads to people trying to manipulate what the serving is in order. As well, really, it's clear there's no chance for consumer confusion about what a single serving is. And then we've seen some where it's kind of like just a standard looking gummy or edible, just kind of like a razor blade that's been, kind of scored on the top, that there's no way for it to be easily pulled apart consistently and have kind of 2 servings or 4 servings consistently. And I think that there's a genuine problem with consumer confusion around those. And I think it also kind of thwarts what the legislature expects, which is 5 milligrams per serving. To say that a 12-ounce can of soda is 5 servings is kind of absurd.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, like they're liquid versus, food versus sort of candy item. That's not defined separately in statute. It's just edibles or not edible, right?
Yeah. I don't think that they make that granular.
And I don't have fully formed thoughts on this, but I do think there is an argument for some parity between all types of edibles in terms of what the limit is.
Right. For me, like edibles, we heard in the comments yesterday from some of the public health officials, it's just like edibles were a very triggering thing for people. The bill that I worked on in 2016 banned all edibles. Some states, Canada, only doesn't allow gummies or.
Well, there's no sugar.
Yeah.
There's still.
I think there's some real concern that the kind of slow onset and kind of the way that they mimic, are enticing the kids or whatever else, it's going to lead to people over consuming and having bad experiences, maybe increase hospital visits, things like that. So then the question for us is, is this a labeling problem, like an information problem, or can this be solved through enhanced labeling?
Right, or public education of some kind.
Or education. We certainly can't thwart the intent of the legislature, which is 5 milligrams per serving.
I think that's like the key, though. I think I personally, I don't have a problem with like a double dose gummy, like one that's clearly you can pull it apart. Clearly, it's been marketed and labeled as a multi-serving gummy, and you can functionally separate it without having to use a knife or having to use some other tool to kind of get a clean demarcation. The problem is the clean demarcation. How can we put words on paper that makes that easy, and also understand when we're doing product registration what's a good attempt at that versus the really bad scoring with a razor blade that barely cuts through like a couple millimeters of the gummy, that makes it so that you're putting 5 pieces into one. You're making like a pie, in one gummy that, might confuse a novice consumer. But I think from an educational perspective, from a labeling perspective, from how we ask people to talk about this specific product, I see a pathway, in my mind, to allowing a double dose gummy or a multi-serving gummy that kind of looks and feels like some of the beverage stuff that we've done, where you allow 2 servings in one specific product. If you can show us and prove to us that you can make a product that is obviously 2 servings and obviously can be pulled apart. And we've had samples from manufacturers. Some are better at achieving that than others, but I think if the right set of information is out there and the right clarity is out there, I think, typically industry will respond to what we're asking them to do. But we can continue to mull it over.
That seems logical. Place to start.
Can you remind us of what the guidance on this says currently on the edibles?
Yeah, I was just looking that up myself because I feel like a lot of what Kyle's talking about, I actually have kind of evolved into the guidance. So this is page 9 of your product registration guidance. It tells people the board's required by Section 881A3B to ensure that that cannabis products are labeled in a manner that states the number of servings of THC in the product measured in servings of a maximum of 5 milligrams per serving. So that's the origin of the whole thing. Related board rules, this is your rule 263, require that, quote, servings must be easy for a consumer to measure, either by clear and visible markings on the cannabis product or physical separation of the servings. So our advice to manufacturers has always been, you can never go wrong with physical separation. The guidance goes on for almost another page that I probably won't read you, but it's actually the most important part, to define serving really clearly, to adopt FDA serving references. This is not, of course, the first industry in which there's been an interest in gaming the serving. In the food industry, would like to pack small servings in because the calorie count appears to go down when it didn't. Different motives, but same desired results. And so FDA has serving references that are really pretty good. And consequently, if you go into a gas station or something, you're not going to find a can of soda that says it has 3 servings in it. So
they're just looking at how many servings was in my can of soda.
Yeah. So I know it's 1, but they would love to have the 10, and then you think it's a 5 calorie drink. So that's why you have this final form rule. These are in pages 9 and 10. And it's there that we expressly allow the 2 servings in a 12-ounce drink, because it's broadly accepted in the marketplace already in the cannabis world that there were actually 2 serving drinks and people would actually split them. The guidance says what sort of FDA would do. We're going to look not only at what is theoretically possible, we're going to look at what people actually do in the real world when they go to split these things up at a party or something. So to Kyle's point, the tiny gummy that splits into 5, but nobody can actually do that with his hands. That's obviously just going to be one thing. Whereas if you have a relatively large gummy that can really be pulled apart into 2 equal parts, it's fine. It seems to comply with the law.
I don't have a problem with the latter.
Mm-hmm. And so if you look at those pages 9 and 10 of the guidance, they do solve a lot of those problems. but there inevitably there is subjectivity about what does it mean to be easy to separate,
And I'm wondering that myself, because if you're looking at a picture on the PR portal, who's to know, right? Whoever's doing PR, how are they going to know that this is a good, easily pulled apart gum? So like, that's something that I'm still trying to think through.
And that when you break it, it's consistent.
Because I don't want something to get registered and then us be like, wait, and you've already manufactured this. And that's one of the things that's going on. I know we have a long runway to kind of move these products as the latest iteration of guidance has been put out. But I don't know if anybody's listening and wants to put any additional comments on how we can make sure that if you're interested in producing those products, they can be easily reviewed by our product registration team. I don't want to ask somebody who's doing it to drop off a sample at the office or something like that necessarily. So like,
or we could be prescriptive. Like we could be really prescriptive about what that looks like. This is the size gummy you have to have, and this is the way it has to be scored. Like we could be really prescriptive.
And that's something we can engage the manufacturing community on, because I know folks are buying specific molds for these.
Right.
There's been investments. So I'm open to trying to figure out a pathway for these is where I'm at right now.
The relevant part of the guidance, which is the closest thing we've got to on point right now, says that the mode of serving measurement, that you need a mode of serving measurement that most consumers, one, can use easily, reliably, and reproducibly, and two, consistently will use in real world applications to apportion servings of no more than 5 milligrams. So it kind of gets that you can separate it, and people actually do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the will use though is an interesting.
Sort of, but it is, in drug regulation, that's done. I mean, when they
okay.
test asthma inhalers, they actually give them to 1 million people and have them puff and see how many, how consistently the dose actually reaches the.
But then did they test how people will use it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the resources.
Right, of course not.
Obviously, but I think the principle that the PR team has said is we're not, if you make an extraordinary claim, you got to come to us with the evidence that you did the study and it's credible, right? We can't run those studies.
Yeah.
I know we focused on gummies here. I know there's some other products that might get swept up that may be less appealing to children than a gummy would to the historical nature of trying to legalize cannabis point, or to the council person from Burlington's point in the hearing.
A tablet, a pill, to me, just is inherently not as attractive to a child as something that's covered in sugar and bright color.
I'm there with you.
Yeah. Is there a rationale to treat tablets differently other than that?
There is. When the General Assembly said serving, they were adopting a food concept. Serving really originated with the idea of how much is the ordinary person going to eat to satiation. And you don't do that with pills. It's a straight drug delivery device, and you could take the view that servings are for food, and that's not a food. And so we're gonna, you nonetheless have a regulatory authority to control the product form and to prohibit dangerous product forms. You do that with lollipops, for example. You just won't register them. So you could say if you took that view that a pill is not a food and there are no servings of pills. You would then have to specify to be minimally responsible, sort of what's the max in a pill. But that hazard of a kid, thinking it's food is much less with something that has no flavor, no sugar, and no visual appeal.
Do you feel like we know that it's less attractive? I mean, I'm just thinking about, I mean, you have young children. Yes. I've had young children. Right. They get their little grabby hands on everything. Particularly something as small as a pill. So I wonder if we know. I mean, I get where it's not the same. Like the legislature was definitely concerned about people marketing items to children. Right. That's not what would happen here. But is it less attractive? And what would happen with accidental ingestion? And should we be concerned about that?
I think the PR guys worry a little bit about bulk product creation. What's not going to be consumed as a pill, what's going to be dissolved into other stuff. And the hazard there is you have somebody somebody prepares 2 gallons of a lemonade. Right. It goes in the fridge. It doesn't go in the sock drawer. inherently doesn't have the label and all the protections that General Assembly meant for it to have. And it's very easy to have an accidental exposure that way with other members of the family that don't know or your children. So that's why, part of the pill thing would be deciding when is a pill really a pill, and
Right.
when is it just kind of a subterfuge to dissolve something
Right.
in a big liquid or something.
Right, a tablet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to that point, I struggle sometimes with where's our role end and where does the parents start? You know what I mean? Hard to define.
I can tell you if those accidental exposures increase, everyone will be looking at us first.
Oh,
Yeah.
damned if we do, we're damned if we don't.
Yeah.
I get that.
Gabe, do we need any sort of special authority to have product specific labeling? Like, if we are going to have a pill or a gummy that it's a single thing that you're supposed to break in half, I would really, in order to avoid consumer confusion, want something on the label that shows a visual mark, like shows that this is 2 servings. I mean, I think what they do in other states, at least some, is they require an imprint on the actual like serving, so you can see like this is 2 5-milligram servings.
Mhm.
I feel like that might not be possible here. I mean, maybe it would be, but I would at the minimum want on the kind of like top of the lid or something very apparent and visible, this single gummy is actually 2 servings and it's 5 on either side of the kind of demarcation.
Yeah, you have pretty broad authority in the existing statute to require kind of risk mitigating information on labels.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of case by case. And so I could see you getting into dispute, not you, but the PR team getting into disputes with people who say, why doesn't this guy that's kind of like me have to have this warning? But you do have that authority.
Okay. All right.
Or the packaging, like if it's gonna
Right.
be a pill, it should look like it's pills and not tax or
Yes,
mints
right,
or
yes,
something,
yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess there's the stickler view that would say that's a medical product and it's already allowed. It just shouldn't be an adult use if it's a pill. But that's again a policy question for you guys.
Anything more on this? A little bit more work to do here, of course. Gabe, are there any, Julie, Kyle, and Gabe, are there any other issues that you wanted to talk about that came from that? I know this is just our initial run through.
Was tier reassignment something that you wanted on your list?
We heard 1 or 2 comments on that. It
Is
wasn't
that not-
huge.
Okay, I wrote it down. I
Yeah,
don't know why.
yeah.
We had a really good comment from one person
Okay,
who said basically, you wrote your tier assignment, your relegation rule, assuming abuse, but some people basically just have a bad year and I wouldn't want to get relegated for
right,
that. And I don't think she's 100% right. I also am comfortable though at looking at the rule that it's permissive authority for you. It's not mandatory that you relegate
Okay.
somebody.
Sure.
So if you have somebody with sound business reasons, nothing makes you do it. It's really a rule that's meant to prevent square footage hoarding and license squatting,
Yep.
kind of,
Yep.
and things you already know could undermine your ability to regulate the market. But so what she's right to be worried about it. She's not right, in my opinion, that you would be compelled to do it. And so I think you're
Okay.
say I don't think any injury would come from the current language.
okay,
Right.
cool.
I'm with you.
Yeah, Colorado and Massachusetts both have it, and they both use it very sparingly.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, Gabe. Anything else that you noticed from the rule hearing that deserves a little bit of discussion here? I know there's some confusion about the ID check at the door, but I think you clarified that during the meeting. It's kind of we're trying to limit it to 1 ID check prior to the sale, and then a visual. I mean, you can ID check at the door if you want to, but we're not going to mandate that you station a person right at the door to check IDs. But you do have to check IDs for anyone that reasonably looks under, I think, 27.
Yeah.
So,
And you could still check IDs for everyone if you wanted to. It
Absolutely.
doesn't tell you, yeah.
And the statutory prohibition on anybody under 21 coming in stands.
Yeah.
It's just the way it's enforced is now a little more flexible, really to prevent gratuitous overstaffing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The paper ID issue that came up, which is the temporary ID that you get when you renew online,
mhm.
is that something we can resolve?
That is one where both DLL and this agency have been really clear that those are no good.
Okay.
And so we had a few people saying, upset that competitors were seeming to take out of date. It's got to be in date, and it's got to be a photo ID issued by a
Okay.
government authority. So we kind of just took and the consequences for taking a paper one could be very serious. It just posed too large.
So
a hole.
even, this is the part I didn't know. So even with a liquor tobacco license, you still can't take that as your form of ID for purchase?
Correct. In fact, the attempt issued by DMV, I believe we found out, says right on it, don't try to use it for that purpose. It's not valid for that purpose.
I have had those. I have never looked that closely.
I hadn't until somebody started fighting with me. But they are pretty good about buttoning that up. So
Okay.
by its own terms.
So there's parity, which is what matters, I think,
Yes.
from my perspective. Okay.
There is, DLL doesn't allow their licensees to take them. A lot of good policy reasons for that, for, every 1,000th person might be inconvenienced for a few days, but I think DLL has found it makes sense to have one consistent.
Nothing more from me right now.
Okay. All right. Well, again, the public comment portal is open. Please, if you heard anything here today that was just, blatantly inaccurate or unhelpful or going to negatively impact your business, let us know about it. And if there's,
Or the opposite. If
Yes.
it was helpful.
oh
we need
yes,
to know.
that always
If
helps.
we get close
Yes,
to
right.
a resolution, that's good too.
Yeah, and again, the entire rule is those 4 rules, they're all open. So if there's portions that we didn't address that are negatively impacting your business or positively impacting it, let us know about those as well. Just because we singled something out as something we wanted to tweak doesn't mean that we can't tweak other things. And I think we've been at this a few times now. I think our general opinion is we want to create the kind of least regulatory environment that achieves the mandates that were given to us by the legislature. So we do want to cut regulation where we can. I think a lot of the changes in Rule 1 are aimed squarely at that. Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting.